not today. Ross Dellenger, SI.com, with us today on this Friday, 365 Sports. Ross with us, and we appreciate a lot of things you were on this week, as always, Ross. But the one I wanted to start with was the NFL looking for more turf to grab, and you had a tweet out, one of the biggest issues for college football execs, the NFL's continuing move into the college football space. Why did it take so long for anyone running college football to realize that?
Well, I think they've been realizing. I just think the frustration level is probably at an all-time high, given the fact that college football executives are trying to schedule 8 additional playoff games in a fairly tight window of December and early January, and that in the NFL is making that more difficult as it continues to kind of encroach on what has always kind of been college football territory. So I think it's just kind of reached a fever pitch because of the playoff expansion.
So they really have no choice other than to go head up right now, Ross, unless they move the season up to a point where they could navigate around it, which it doesn't seem like they want to do.
Well, I think that – they're dealing with two things, two different kind of routes here, I guess. One route is just the 24 and 25 playoff expansion, just those years before the contract runs out. And then there's another route, and that is the 26 and beyond college football expansion playoff. These two playoffs, they probably will remain the same as far as the number of teams, 12, and the formula or the format, 6 at-large, 6 conference champions get an automatic bid. But what will change is probably the date. So in the 24-25 version, what they're looking at is having the first round in the third weekend of December and having the quarterfinals on New Year's Day, New Year's Eve window, and having the semifinals, about a week into January, and the championship game 2 or 3 weeks into January. Now, the 26 version, there's a plan to potentially move up the regular season maybe by a week and have week 0 become week 1 and basically have championship games on Thanksgiving, moving up rivalry week a week. Everything would shift a week. And that way they don't go too far into January with the playoff and encroach on the NFL's territory. And that way the semifinals in that version, 26 and beyond, might be on New Year's Day instead of the quarterfinals. So that's kind of what we're dealing with. And so 24-25 is going to be challenging when it comes to the NFL. And they're going to end up going head-to-head in 24-25 with the NFL. And they'll probably go head-to-head on the first round, and they might go head-to-head potentially in the semifinals. But I think the big one is the first round. The third weekend in December, the NFL starts playing Saturday regular season games. They'll play 3 regular season games, and that means college football will probably have there's 4 first-round games and first-round playoff games in the CFP expansion model. And so at least 2, maybe 3, will be played on that Saturday. We'll be going up against the NFL. I think others, 1 or 2 maybe, have played on that Friday night.
Ross, how much of a debate do you think there is in terms of, hosting those first-round playoff games? Obviously, I know bowl sponsors can't be all that happy about it, but that seems to be kind of the way that most, I think, fans would like to see it go, and certainly the schools themselves in many ways.
Well, it's going to, the format is going to change, and the format is going to stay the same for 24 and 25, but if the format is going to change, it'll be the opposite. It'll be more probably home on-campus games. And that we had a story at SI, actually. One of the commissioners, Craig Thompson of Mount West, who's kind of on his way out, said that he believes the quarterfinals and maybe the semifinals should be at home. That won't happen in 24-25 if they do expand early. That will not happen. There'll be the first round will be at home sites, and then the quarters and semis will be at bowls. But in the future, you might see more home games maybe. College football is the situation with the bowls in college football is a lot is similar to kind of a microcosm of college sports in general right now, with NIL and amateurism. They're kind of stuck in the middle, and not really wanting to go full professional, but pulling away from, being an amateur sport. And I think in a way the bowls represent something kind of similar. College football doesn't want to completely rid itself of the bowls. There's a lot of generations that still like the bowls, and but at the same time they're kind of pulling away from the bowl structure, and you could see it, probably with each passing year, with each passing generation, the bowls probably slip further and further down, and eventually, I think Craig Thompson said this to me in that story, you might see home games for quarters and semis instead of at bowl side.
Ross, if a team gets a first-round bye, so they're talking about once it expands, they would play, as of right now, they'd play the conference championship game the first weekend in December. Maybe that's moved back a week before. A team that would then play in the first round, home or not, will probably play 2 weeks after that, and then turn around and play a week or two against a team that was off for nearly 3 or 4 weeks while they've had to play an extra game. Is that a little bit out of whack?
Well, yeah, so the teams that play in the first round, I want to say probably half of them, so there's going to be 8 of them, obviously the 5th seed all the way through the 12th seed. I would say at least half of them, so at least 4, and maybe as many as 5 or 6, will not have played in a championship game. Right? I would say at least 4 probably will not have played in a championship game. They're going to be, but there's going to be 3 or 4 that have played in a championship game. There's at least going to be 2 that have played in a championship game, because there's 6 bids to conference champions, top 4 seeds, and then another 2. So there will be at least 2, you're right, that will play in a conference championship game, having won a conference championship game, and will potentially, and this is, Craig Thompson mentioned this in that story about how he believes more home games, there should be more home games instead of bowl games, because you're asking fans to travel to a conference championship game site the first week in December, or Thanksgiving if they move it up. Then 2 weeks later, if you're a road team, if you're a 12 or 11, 10 seed, having won a conference championship, which is possible, you will be on the road traveling. If you win that game, you will be at a bowl site. Win that game, you will be at another bowl site. You're talking about, if you make it all the way through, you'll be on the road 5 weeks out of 9 weeks, 9 weeks. That is an issue, and that's why I think in the future iterations, you might see more home games. Now, what I think part of what you were asking about is it too unfair, for a team to play a conference championship game 2 weeks later, play another game and then if they win that, they get a top 4 seed who is basically set for a month, close to a month. And yeah, that's a big gap. And I think that gap closes a little bit if they move the season, up a little bit and things kind of get maybe a little closer together, because I think they wanted it that way because they want the top 4 seeds to have a distinct advantage. And certainly in this system, they do.
Yeah, well, they don't want to change too much, Ross. They dug their heels dug their heels in for a long time. When it comes to the bowls, these are groups in cities and that have a lot of political sway. In many cases, they're big lobbies for the city and all that. So I know that there are especially several that will not go quietly. How do they negotiate that out so that the bowls are still there and that they can make something of that without too much of a fight?
Well, that's a real, certainly a real issue, is trying to keep the bowls happy, and appease them. And I think part of the New Year's Six, incorporating the 6 bowls into the rotation for quarters and semis, is a way for them to do that. It's a tricky issue. There's a fine line there. You talk to younger generations of athletic directors, the 30-somethings, even the 40-somethings. Shoot, there's one in his early mid-50s. I've talked to several in their early mid-50s who they don't want to play bowl games anymore. They don't think the bowl system should be around. Players are pulling out. They don't want to play in the game. It's just kind of fading a little bit to a lot of administrators and a lot of coaches and a lot of players. You saw Nick Saban, I think it was a couple weeks ago, mentioned, I think he said flatly on the record, players don't want to play in bowl games. And so what you're going to see, too, in the playoff, although bowls are going to host these quarters and semis, you can bet these games are going to be like regular playoff games. The team's not flying in 5 days before and going to have parties and going to the slip and slide. They'll be in the night before, or maybe at most probably 2 nights before a game. And it'll be pretty much a regular game just hosted by the bowl. And there'll be parties and stuff around, but the teams probably won't be a whole big part of that. So it's a fine line right now that college football is kind of walking when it comes to the bowls, and it'll be interesting moving forward to see how the bowls survive.
Ross, there was a report earlier this week, just continued talk about these upcoming TV deals and the Big 12 perhaps being able to get something done with ESPN Fox a little early. Remains to be seen if that will be the case or not. But just what have kind of been the thoughts that you've gathered around the industry and people you've talked to just about Brett Yormark, the Big 12, and kind of where they sit currently?
Yeah, Brett has been fairly vocal in public about some things that normally you're not. He emerged from the commissioner room yesterday in Dallas, actually walked right up to me, and him had a little bit of a conversation, and he said, "I'm done talking. I'm talked out." Of course, he went on to talk a little bit before he left for another meeting. But he's been pretty out front, and he's been boastful and confident. That is for sure. And you know what? He might be right. He might be getting this deal done within the next couple of weeks, which would be a huge success. Or, and he has said it before about his role as a salesman, or he is being a good salesman, and he is putting out information, whether through media or just himself, that helps his case. So there's probably a little bit of that going on as well.
Ross, one more thing for you. You have the story that I think it was up yesterday. Behind the scenes and closed doors that led to college football's playoff expansion. It's a full throttle, very lengthy piece, and it's got all sorts of great stories in it, inside as well, secret meetings, last-minute hurdles, a couple of other things. It's very intriguing. You want to give everyone a little bit more of a glimpse other than what I have given about your story?
Sure. Yeah. It's kind of a story I've been wanting to do, for the last year or so. From last August through February, basically, the commissioners, as we all know, right, squabbling and could not come up with a playoff format, could not agree unanimously on a playoff format. So the presidents, their bosses on the CFP board, executive board, took it over. And in August, we know that this past August that they adopted a playoff kind of suddenly and stunningly in these secret meetings. So wanted to get inside and see exactly how they went. And it was pretty fascinating, and Mark Neum, Mississippi State president, had a big role. He's the chairman of the CFP board in that. So did Schulz, Kirk Schulz out of Washington State, and Gordon Gee, Big 12 in West Virginia, had a big role in getting the presidents together and getting this done, and not just getting it done but getting it done unanimously so we could have an expanded playoff maybe before 2026. Of course, the second part of all that is it's back to the commissioners to finalize the details. They're working on it. I think within the next week or two, we probably will hear good news that they'll be expanding early, either 24 or 25. The confidence is pretty high.
Were you in Knoxville on Saturday?
I was. I sure was. I was.
Can you try to explain that? Yeah.
Yeah. It was. Yeah. Well. I was there for about 5 days leading up to the game, so you saw the city kind of building and the buzz getting louder and louder until of course, game day, and it was a great game, right? Fantastic battle of new age slugfest with the offenses and the quarterbacks. But then the post game scene, just the amount of people all wearing the same color, all doing a lot of the same things, whether that be climbing goalposts or smoking cigars. It was quite a scene. It probably, in 17, 18 years of being a sports writer, I've never quite seen a post-game environment like that.
Thank you, Ross. Appreciate your time. Enjoy the weekend. Ross Dellenger, SI.com, excuse me, is